All right, welcome back to the Field of 68's After Dark. I am Jeff Goodman. I'm joined by Randolph Childress, Kevin Sweeney, and the last automatic bid of the night. It's not really much of an automatic bid because Gonzaga is going to get the number one overall seed, but the Zags got some revenge on St. Mary's, a St. Mary's team that beat them a week or so ago in a game that was maybe as surprising as any recently, just because I saw that St. Mary's team, guys, earlier this year in person against Colorado State. And I walked away being like, yeah, they're probably a fringe tournament team. But then you forget how good Randy Bennett is. And he is one of the, and I've said this over and over, one of the top 10 X's and O's guys in college basketball. What he does with his talent is remarkable. He doesn't have the Patty Millses or even the Mickey McConnells or the Omar Samhans right now. He's got some good players, but not great players. And what he's done right now to get them where they're probably looking at a number 5 seed is incredibly impressive. But on the flip side, and we'll start with the Zags, Kevin, this team wrapped up the number 1 overall seed tonight, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe if Baylor wins the Big 12 tournament, there'll be a conversation because they'd have, 15 quadrant 1 wins at that point. That'd be really impressive. But I think, at 25-3 with the top metrics, it's going to be Gonzaga. And, for the second year in a row, they'll be the number 1 overall seed. For the 4th year in a row, if we count 2020, when, the bracket matrix plans it out, every bracketologist, Gonzaga's a 1 seed that year. So basically 4 years in a row, Gonzaga's been a 1 seed. They had 1 year where they went 32-5 and got a 4 seed. And the year before that, they went to the national championship game. So what Mark Few is doing up there, it seems to be working, Jeff. I don't know about you. It seems to be working.
So are you buying, RC, that this Gonzaga team, because we've said like last year it was Baylor, Gonzaga, and everybody else. Is there as much of it? I know they're totally different Gonzaga teams. But do you feel like this team is equally as dangerous as last year's, even though I know Jalen Suggs was a guy who could do some things that obviously they don't have anybody on this team, but you've got a defender like Chet Holmgren who gives you that dimension that they didn't have a year ago.
I think they're a different team, but I still have them as a favorite. Even tonight, I don't think Chet played very well tonight, but they had Watson stepping up and just filled in admirably. He went 5 or 6 for 10 points tonight, 5 rebounds. And so that's my thing with Gonzaga. I don't think they're relying on one person to be dominant. They can move around pieces more. Yeah. Everyone else, we're like, all right, this guy's got to show up or and be at his best, or they're not going to go for it. I think they're I think they're probably the only team, because even the teams we're high on, like Kentucky, if Oscar Tshiebwe gets in foul trouble, they're a different team. I think they're one team that can get away with foul trouble more, or a guy not playing his best game, than any team in the country.
So I agree with that, but my concern is I don't think Mark Few has utilized his bench as much as I thought he would this year. Like, I really thought Nolan Hickman, when I was there against Texas, I thought Hickman was going to be a guy that ultimately played 20 minutes every game. Yeah. And I thought Hunter Salas would come along. Like, he didn't play really at all in that game, but I thought like second half of the year when they're playing against WCC teams, he'd find a way to get him going. And this would be a strong 8-man rotation. And it's really not. They've got 5 or 6 dudes that can all hurt you. But I don't know if I trust Nolan Hickman as much as I thought I would trust Nolan Hickman at this point, Kevin.
Yeah, I don't think the depth has been great. I think the other thing with Hickman and Salas is they give you the athleticism and the pedigree that some of these guys don't really have. And I think you saw in the Duke game going back, I think to Alabama game as well to a certain extent, but I think the Duke game was most obvious. And the Baylor game last year, that Gonzaga has struggled when they've dealt with teams that have overwhelming levels of athleticism. When teams can just make every pass difficult and kind of blow up their actions, Gonzaga's going to score because their guys are so smart. They're going to cut off and make good decisions and hit shots and move the basketball. But it's going to be harder for them, and they're not going to be able to get stops at quite as high a level. And so, I had hoped, I think, in the preseason that Hickman and Salas could kind of provide that. They haven't really. I mean, I think Hickman gives him some good minutes. He can, hit a shot, but also handle the ball. And he's done a good job, I think, defensively. Like he's a solid, for a freshman, I don't think he's a bad defender. But they haven't made the impact I think you'd hoped. And so I think, when you're looking at when they match up with a Duke again, or they match up with an Arizona who's super athletic, how do they play? And I think, to me, so much of that's going to be, can they get enough stops? And I think a lot of that sits on Chet and his ability to protect the rim, because they're going to need him kind of flying around and taking things away at the basket, because otherwise, I think they're going to struggle to get stops. But I think they're obviously an elite team. They're the earned number one. There's no question. They've had a tremendous year. But I don't necessarily think they feel so overwhelming the way they did a season ago, because I don't think they're quite as explosive because they don't have Suggs.
No, you're right. The one thing I'll say is that another question mark of mine was how they shoot the ball coming into the year, and they've shot it really well collectively. Like all these guys, Bolton, Chet. I'm a big Strother guy. I think he's going to be terrific. I'm not going to say he's being held back, because he's had his moments, but I think he's kind of that guy that sometimes gets lost a little bit in the shuffle with them. But he's kind of that X factor guy for me that, if somebody is struggling, he's fully capable of going for 20, and he has. And that's what you were talking about, RC, is like their balance, their ability, that if Drew Timme somehow gets, matched up against somebody with length and athleticism and he struggles, you've got other guys that can step forward and get, 4 other guys in double figures.
I think that's the biggest thing. Like we talked about, they just got multiple guys. They're not dependent upon that one guy. And when you get through this conference tournament, you got to win 6 games.
Yeah.
Ultimate goal. And it's hard to do against a scouting report. And the more guys you got that can balance scoring, the more likely you're to be successful.
All right. I need you to talk some sense into Sweeney, Randolph, about Chet Holmgren now. All right. We're going to try to educate Sweeney on why, well, actually, I think Sweeney actually is right about this on Chet, to be honest. I don't know where he's got him in his pecking order. He doesn't have him at 1. I know that. Where do you have him on your Sweeney big board right now?
So I have Jabari Smith number 1. I think, to me, I would be open to Chet at 2. I think I would lean towards Banchero at 2 and then Chet at 3. But I think, again, and I'm going to let RC clap back here if he wants. But to me, the thing that concerns me with Chet is that against the best teams that they've played, he's struggled. And again, a lot of that was early in the season when he was still finding his footing. So, he can prove me wrong in the NCAA tournament when he plays high major teams with big time athletes. But, he has struggled both St. Mary's games, like pretty significantly. And I don't need people coming in and saying, oh, well, he balled out against San Francisco last night, because they're a top 25 Ken Pom team. Yeah, I think a lot of guys would ball out against Vova Markovetsky and Zane Meeks up front. Like, it wasn't even Masalski who's going to be a EuroLeague guy. I mean, no disrespect to Vova Markovetsky and to Zane Meeks and to Josh Coonan, but those guys don't stand a chance against any NBA prospect.
RC?
I can't argue with them. I agree. I think it's the same. And my concern isn't just him showing up in games, because again, he's young, they're freshmen, but I worry about him physically. I just don't know if physically he can take the next step and then go against grown men. I don't think his body is built to add a ton of weight. He has that Kevin Durant type body. The difference is Kevin Durant's a guard, and he's not a guard. He's a forward. And I just don't know how much weight he can gain. And then you got to be really careful with him, how he puts on the weight and he plays. And he needs to go somewhere with a physical guy that's going to allow him to do what he does. And he's going to need time.
So I talked to an NBA GM for a while, Saturday, actually, before the Duke Carolina game. So on the phone with him. And I asked him that. I don't even know why we got to talking about Chet, but we did. I think I just wanted to find out who he had number 1. And he said to me, he might not take Chet in his top 3. He might take Jaden Ivey over Chet Holmgren, because he said, we've never really had a guy with that body build in the NBA. He actually said, we've never had kind of a guy with the shoulders, even like he's kind of got the hunchback like Kevin McHale had. Now, Kevin McHale was broad. He had big shoulders, but the way he's hunched over, that, he kind of compared him to McHale, but in that way. And he worried whether he'll listen. He's kind of the opposite of Zion in the way that you worry about their bodies, right? Zion carried too much. Chet doesn't carry enough. And you wonder, how is he going to be able to put it on again, because he doesn't have the shoulders to be able to put on that type of weight. So it's going to be interesting, but I'm with you, Sweeney. I would go Jabari 1. I would go Paolo 2. But I think some NBA teams are going to be terrified of missing potentially on Chet, because if he hits his ceiling, listen, he can't play in the NBA next year. He can't. Strength-wise, he can't.
He's struggling with college physicality right now. The biggest games when teams have been physical with him, when he's not getting guarded by Pacific, he's struggling physicality-wise. It's a different
He's
world.
A second contract guy that you bring him in on and you say, like, all right, it's going to take some time. Well, again, are you going to do that when you know you could throw Paolo out there tomorrow physically?
That's the thing I was going to ask you guys, because I'm going to throw this name out at you. Jermaine O'Neal. Now, Sweeney, I don't know if you remember Jermaine O'Neal. But when he got drafted, no, I'm serious. When Jermaine O'Neal got drafted, he didn't even play. It was, we're going to work you out individually, introduced him to the strength coach. Yep. That's your rookie year. Now, he turned out to be a hell of a player, so it's not an indictment on him. Jermaine O'Neal's a hell of a player. But when being there when he got drafted, it wasn't even, didn't even think about playing him. It was, you're going to go down here to the weight room. This is your new best friend. We'll see you next year. And then we'll bring you out here practicing and working out. The problem is Jermaine, was a high school similarly. I mean, similar situation, similar build almost. Chet's a little taller.
Yeah.
But the difference is Jermaine wasn't top 3, top 4. You wasn't talking a top 3 pick, and no one's going to take a top 3 pick and just say, all right, you just sit and go. But that's what they need to do. If you want to protect your investment, you're going to draft this dude and treat him like Jermaine O'Neal. Let him go in the weight room to get stronger, to help you so his game can flourish. If you throw him out there, you kill his confidence. You risk getting him hurt, and you risk your job.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think he's a couple years away, and you've got to get him on a great strength program to be able to get him so that, because guys are going to drive him into the rim. I don't care how good a shot blocker he is. It doesn't matter. He's got no base right now to be able to handle it when men post him up. Like you said, Sweeney, in the WCC, he's having enough trouble right now, holding his position. Now, again, he's so long. And the one thing we can talk all we want about the negatives of Chet Holmgren. Well, the positives are the dude's shooting like 45% from 3 this year at his size. And he is a terrific shot blocker. So if he could put on the weight, I guess what I was saying is these GMs are terrified, because if you miss on him, he could be a unicorn type player. He could be a dominant player in the NBA if he can put on this weight. All right, make sure you don't go anywhere, because when we get back, I'm going to tell you the coaches that have the most riding on this coming week.